The discussion, Ziv Maor of Tirtzu, a group that has protested against the Supreme Court, calling it a judicial dictatorship and a political actor with utter disregard for Israeli democracy. Ziv, let's start with a more general question. We've seen the justices during this proceedings repeatedly say they are not there to discuss political matters, only legal matters. They've even reprimanded the lawyers for bringing in what they say are political statements. I mean, do you accept that at all, that the court is trying to keep what we might call politics out of it, or you just reject that that's impossible here?
It's not possible by definition, and I mean, it's ludicrous even to say so, because this entire appeal, or this set of appeals, is purely political. There is not a single question in this appeal that is not political. Now, the right thing for the judges to do would be to reject this appeal whatsoever on the threshold of the court, not even to discuss it. Their very illegal decision to deliberate, with the very deliberation, is against the law. Well, basically says we are going to discuss politics, because this appeal is purely political.
Right, but there are some issues, legitimate questions that the justices raise, that the legislature has a responsibility to legislate and to make appointments. Doesn't the court have the right, maybe not to get into the details of what that legislation is, but to see that other parts of the government are fulfilling their functions?
Well, no. In democracy, this responsibility does not fall into the hand of the court, does not fall into the hand of unelected judges, but into the fall of it falls in the hand of the public with the manner of election. We judge whether or not the politicians that we sent to the parliament and to the government to make the right decisions. Those judges has got no authority, no legal nor moral authority to make this decision for us. Now, one must not mistake in this issue. This deliberation is not whether or not the agreement between the Likud and Benny Gantz is legal. The question is whether or not the decision of the Israeli public in the elections that took part 2 months ago is legitimate in the eyes of those 11 judges. And this is not how democracy worked. We went to the voting casket, made our decision, and now our decision is being judged again and being seconded by the judges. This is not a democracy, and this is completely illegal on behalf of the judges to make this deliberation.
All right, well, these are complicated issues. We're going to take a brief break. Stay with us. We're going to come back, continue on this discussion. Welcome back to our special coverage on I-24 News, and we are still focused on today's hearing in Israel's High Court of Justice. And still with us is Ziv Maor of Tirtzu, an organization that is critical of the court's involvement in what it says are political matters. And I want to pick up on that point, Ziv. You keep saying in a democracy the court doesn't involve itself in this. But in the United States, the Supreme Court involves itself in legislation. It rules whether legislation is constitutional. It involved itself in the Obamacare, whether it could go ahead. Now, you're right, and the court seems to say we can't reverse the election, the results with Benjamin Netanyahu becoming prime minister. But doesn't the court, in any democracy, a Supreme Court, have the right to ensure that other parts of the government are fulfilling their legally mandated functions?
Well, first of all, in order to do that, a country must have a constitution. Israel does not have a constitution that explicitly allows the court to make such decisions. Now, in the case of the United States, for instance, we have clear examples in history that when the Supreme Court crossed the border, for instance, in the very famous Ex parte Merriman case of 1863, President Lincoln just simply disobeyed the court. The same thing happened with the Chad case of 1983, the Senate disobeyed the court. When the court crosses the line, the politicians disobey. The same happened in 1962 in France. Democracies have a tradition of disobeying courts that cross a certain boundary. We do not yet have this tradition, and this is what my own expectation from our politician, from our elected, is. If the court indeed makes this illegal decision and decides against the will of the public that the outcome of the elections was not good enough for those 11 people, then I expect the politicians to simply disobey, not to ignore.
I just want to be clear, to make a statement of disobey the court, then why shouldn't every organization, any Palestinian organization, or any organization simply disobey the Supreme Court. I mean, a democracy is not just majority rule. It is a working system of laws. And since Israel doesn't have a constitution, it is built in some ways on the decisions of the Supreme Court.
Now, so you made several statements. First of all, it is indeed a working system in Israel. It is a not working system because of the judicial imperialism that the Israeli Supreme Court have imposed upon our democracy in the past 2 decades. It simply does not work. The Knesset legislates and the court overrules whatever agenda that they dislike. This is the way it is, and this needs to be amended. There is no legislative way to amend it, only the way of disobedience, which is the way that the United States went through 160 years ago. This is the way it must go. There is no other way. There is no legislation that could fix our democracy and redeem it from the claws of our Supreme Court. That's the way it is. As for your question, can anybody else disobey the court? Well, when someone make an illegal decision, they have to bear with the consequences. Israel, like many other countries, has immunity to its elected. It's not because we are giving them privileges, as if we are in some monarchic regime when the governors have privileges. No, it is because sometimes you must disobey the law in order to protect the law.
Ziv, one brief question. What do you think will happen if, for example, the Supreme Court should rule that either Benjamin Netanyahu can't form the next government or this coalition agreement does not work under law? What will actually happen, do you think?
What will actually happen, the consensus and the expectation is that there will be indeed a fourth election. Many people say that in this election, the right-wing bloc will gain a significant win because of the consequences that led to the fourth elections. I have my doubts about this prediction, but this is what people expect, and I do assume that there will be fourth elections.
Okay, Ziv Maor from Tirtzu, thank you for joining us.